The hospital hallway was quiet that night. Too quiet. In the neonatal unit, where the tiniest, most fragile babies are cared for, something was terribly wrong. But nobody knew it yet. This is the story of a nurse everyone trusted. A nurse with a bright smile who sent sympathy cards to grieving parents. A nurse who seemed to care deeply about every single baby in her care. But beneath that caring surface, something dark was hiding. Something that would shake an entire country to its core. This is the true story of Lucy Letby. And before we go any further, if you're interested in real crime stories told with respect and truth, hit that subscribe button. We're about to take you on a journey through one of the most disturbing cases in British history, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The Countess of Chester Hospital is an important community hospital in the northwest of England. In 2015 and 2016, parents brought their newborn babies there, believing they would be safe. The neonatal unit was staffed with nurses and doctors working around the clock, caring for premature and sick babies, tiny fighters who needed extra help to survive. Lucy Letby was one of those nurses. She seemed perfect for the job. She'd been at the hospital since 2011, was friendly, helpful, and well-liked by her colleagues. Parents trusted her with their most precious gifts. But in June 2015, something started to happen that nobody could explain. Babies started dying. Now, you might think, well, sick babies sometimes don't make it. And you'd be right. But this was different. These babies were stable, they were getting better. Then suddenly, without warning, they would collapse. Their hearts would stop. Their breathing would fail. Their skin would turn strange colors. And it kept happening on the same nurse's shifts. Lucy Letby's shifts. Dr. Stephen Breyer, a senior consultant, was one of the first to notice something strange. What he was seeing didn't make medical sense. A baby would be fine one moment, and in crisis the next. Why was it happening so often? And why were so many of these emergencies happening when Lucy Letby was working? Another doctor, Ravi Jairam, started paying attention too. One night, he walked past a room and saw something that made his blood run cold. He saw Lucy Letby standing over a baby's incubator. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there. The baby was in distress, but she hadn't called for help. Dr. Jairam rushed in and helped save the baby's life. But the image stuck in his mind. By early 2016, the doctors were seriously worried. They noticed that the sudden collapses and unexpected deaths were all clustering around Lucy's shifts. When Lucy worked the day shift, babies collapsed during the day. When she worked the night shift, they collapsed at night. When she was on vacation, the unit was calmer, safer. The doctors did something brave. They went to hospital managers and said, "We think something is wrong. We think Lucy Letby might be harming these babies." But the managers didn't believe them. Instead of investigating Lucy, they told the doctors to apologize to her. The doctors were forced to write apology letters, all while more babies were being harmed. Lucy Letby seemed like a normal young woman. She had a cat, friends, and sent kind sympathy cards to families whose babies had died. But when police finally searched her house, they found something chilling. Hundreds of handwritten notes, with words like, "I am evil, I did this," and "I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them." They also found she had kept confidential hospital paperwork about the babies who had died and had been searching for their families on Facebook. It took until 2017 for the hospital to finally call the police. The investigation was massive. They created a chart tracking every suspicious incident against which nurses were working. Lucy Letby's name appeared next to every single one. When Lucy wasn't working, babies were fine. When she was working, they suddenly collapsed. Medical experts discovered these babies were being deliberately harmed. Some had air injected into their bloodstream. Others were poisoned with insulin. Some were force-fed milk until their tiny organs were damaged. These weren't accidents. These babies were being murdered. And all the evidence pointed to one person. In July 2018, police arrested Lucy Letby for the first time. She denied everything. They arrested her 2 more times before finally charging her in November 2020 with multiple murders and attempted murders. While this was all unfolding, think about the families, parents who had trusted the hospital, who lost their children and were told it was just bad luck. The wheels of justice were finally turning, but for these families, the nightmare had just begun. Now they knew the truth. Their babies hadn't died of natural causes. Their babies had been murdered, and the killer was the very same nurse who had comforted them, sent them sympathy cards, and even stood beside them at their babies' funerals. Her name was Lucy Letby. Some parents remembered Lucy being the one to tell them their baby had passed away. They remembered her seeming genuinely upset, like she truly cared. But she was the one who had killed them. One mother recalled Lucy offering to take photos of her dying baby, a way to create memories for the family. At the time, it felt like such a kind, compassionate gesture. Now, knowing the truth, it felt chillingly sinister. Another family remembered receiving a sympathy card from Lucy after their baby's death. She wrote about how she'd done everything she could, how she was thinking of them in their grief. But she was the one who had secretly injected their baby with air. The sense of betrayal these families must have felt is almost impossible to comprehend. When the trial finally began in October 2022, the evidence against her was overwhelming. Medical experts, statistical analysis, handwritten notes found in her home, hospital records, and testimony from doctors who had long suspected something was wrong. But Lucy Letby maintained her innocence. She claimed she was being scapegoated for problems at the hospital. She insisted the deaths were natural, that she was a good nurse who loved her job and loved babies. The trial, held at Manchester Crown Court, became one of the longest in British history, lasting over 10 months. The details that emerged would shock the entire nation. The courtroom heard heart-wrenching testimony from grieving parents. They heard from doctors and nurses who had worked alongside Lucy, and from medical experts who explained, in careful, horrifying detail, how these tiny, vulnerable babies had been killed. The prosecution painted a picture of a nurse who killed for reasons no one could fully understand. They presented shift patterns, showing a clear correlation. The unexplained collapses and deaths only happened when Lucy was on duty. They revealed text messages Lucy had sent. In one, after a baby died, she texted a colleague asking for the time of death. The colleague found it strange. Lucy had been there. Why was she asking? The prosecution suggested she was trying to create a false alibi. Even more disturbingly, they showed that Lucy had searched for the families of her victims on Facebook, repeatedly, sometimes in the dead of night, months, or even years after their deaths. Medical experts testified about insulin poisoning, explaining that the levels found in 2 babies could only have come from a deliberate injection. It couldn't have been an accident. They showed X-rays of babies with unusual pockets of air in their bodies, air that simply shouldn't have been there. The prosecution argued that Lucy enjoyed the drama of the emergencies she created, that she liked being at the center of the chaos, pretending to save the very baby she had just harmed. Some evidence even suggested she would harm a baby and then text a doctor she had a crush on, knowing he'd rush to the unit to help. Lucy's defense team tried to create doubt. They argued the neonatal unit was understaffed and had hygiene issues. They brought in their own experts to question the prosecution's findings. And Lucy herself took the stand. She cried. She insisted she was innocent, that she loved babies and would never hurt them. When asked about her handwritten notes, one of which read, "I am evil, I did this," she claimed they were just her way of dealing with stress, not a confession. She had no real explanation for keeping medical records or for the obsessive Facebook searches. After listening to 10 months of evidence, the jury delivered its verdict in August 2023. Guilty. Guilty of murdering 7 babies. Guilty of attempting to murder 6 more. In a later retrial, she was found guilty of attempting to murder another baby, bringing the total to 7 murders and 7 attempted murders. Lucy Letby, the trusted nurse, was a serial killer. She was sentenced to a whole life order, meaning she will die in prison. But she refused to appear in court for her sentencing. She stayed in her cell, unwilling to face the families whose lives she had shattered. While the judge read her sentence to an empty chair, those families gave their victim impact statements, describing their unending pain, their nightmares, and the stolen futures of the children they would never see grow up. The country was in shock. How could a nurse, someone trained to heal, murder the most vulnerable patients imaginable? As the dust settled from the trial, more uncomfortable truths began to emerge. Remember those doctors who raised concerns back in 2016? Dr. Stephen Breyer and Dr. Ravi Jairam? The ones who were forced to apologize to Lucy Letby? Well, they started speaking out. Dr. Jairam gave interviews, his voice shaking with emotion, describing the frustration of knowing something was wrong and being ignored. He talked about the babies who might still be alive if the hospital had just listened. The hospital management had failed. Badly. Instead of investigating when doctors raised alarms, they protected Lucy. They worried about the hospital's reputation, about being sued, about upsetting a staff member. But they hadn't worried enough about the babies. The government knew they needed answers, so they ordered a public inquiry, a huge investigation to figure out what went wrong. It's called the Thirlwall Inquiry, and what it's uncovered is deeply troubling. Hospital executives knew about the concerns. They had meetings about Lucy Letby. They discussed the pattern of deaths. But instead of acting decisively, they hesitated. They delayed. They even tried to get the concerned doctors to have a friendly chat with the woman they suspected of murdering babies. Some managers, the inquiry heard, were more worried about bad publicity than dead babies. And here is something that will make your blood boil. Even after Lucy was removed from the neonatal unit, the hospital paid her full salary. For years, even after she was arrested, they kept paying her, right up until her conviction. But the story doesn't end there. In January 2025, police arrested two former senior managers from the hospital, Tony Chambers and Allison Kelly. Chambers was the CEO, Kelly was the director of nursing. They were arrested on suspicion of corporate manslaughter. This sent shockwaves through the healthcare system. Suddenly, managers across the country realized they could be held personally accountable if they ignore safety concerns. The message was clear. If you're in charge and you ignore warnings, you might go to prison. Now, here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Even though Lucy Letby is in prison for life, some people are questioning whether she's actually guilty. I know that sounds strange, but a group of scientists, statisticians, and doctors are raising serious questions about the evidence. Their main concern is about statistics. Remember how the prosecution showed Lucy was present at every suspicious incident? These experts argue you have to be careful with that. Think of it like this. If it rains every time you carry an umbrella, does that mean you caused the rain? Of course not. They ask, was Lucy present because she was causing the collapses? Or did she, as one of the most experienced nurses, simply work with the sickest babies on the busiest shifts, meaning she'd naturally be present when more emergencies happened? A group of international neonatal experts, led by Dr. Shu Li, even wrote an open letter expressing concern about the medical evidence. They questioned if the babies were really murdered or if they might have died from natural causes. They argued the evidence for air embolism, for example, was weak and could have other explanations. These doubters believe the prosecution built a theory, Lucy is a killer, and then made all the ambiguous evidence fit that story. This has created a huge controversy. On one side, people say the jury heard all the evidence for 10 months. The verdict is sound, and questioning it is an insult to the grieving families. On the other side, people say scientific evidence must always be questioned. If there's even a tiny chance an innocent person is in prison, we have to take that seriously. The families of the murdered babies are furious. They say the constant questioning of Lucy's guilt is causing them unimaginable pain. They just want closure. But the doubters say they aren't trying to cause pain. They're trying to ensure justice is correct. Because if Lucy Letby is innocent, the real killer could still be out there. It's an impossible situation. Lucy Letby, maintaining her innocence, tried to appeal her conviction in May 2024. The Court of Appeal rejected it, saying the trial was fair and the verdict was sound. But it's not over. Her supporters have asked the Criminal Cases Review Commission, an independent body, to investigate a possible miscarriage of justice. As of now, that review is still ongoing. The legal battle might not be over, leaving everyone, the families, the public, and the justice system, waiting for an answer that may never feel truly final. In January 2026, a major decision was made in the Lucy Letby case. The Crown Prosecution Service, or CPS, announced they would not be charging her with any more crimes. They looked at all the other suspicious cases but decided the evidence wasn't strong enough, or that another long, painful trial just wasn't in the public's best interest. For some, this was a relief, sparing families more heartache. But for others, it means they may never get the full answers about what happened to their babies. It's got interviews with journalists, legal experts, and even some of the medical staff involved. The documentary walks you through the whole timeline, from the first concerns to the trial itself. What is really grabbing people's attention is that it doesn't just present Lucy as guilty and move on. It dives into the doubts and controversies, letting viewers hear different sides and make up their own minds. but others argue it's vital journalism to explore every angle of such a complex and important story. Beyond Lucy Letby herself, this case has forced a hard look at our healthcare system. An official investigation, the Thowell Inquiry, is trying to answer some huge questions. How can hospitals create a culture where staff feel safe to raise the alarm? What's the right way to act when doctors suspect a colleague is harming patients? And when is the right time for a hospital to call the police? These aren't easy questions. If police are called for every little thing, you might create a culture of fear. But if you wait too long, as happened here, more lives could be lost. The inquiry's findings could change how hospitals all over Britain operate. Then there's the question of why. If Lucy Letby is guilty, what could possibly be her motive? Psychologists have theories. Some serial killers in healthcare do it for attention, creating emergencies so they can be the hero. Others crave the power of life and death. Some are battling severe mental illness. But with Lucy Letby, we just don't know. No clear motive ever came out in the trial. The prosecution argued they didn't need one. They just had to prove she did it. But for us, for human nature, we need to understand why. Maybe she enjoyed the drama of emergencies. Maybe she craved attention from a doctor she had feelings for. Or maybe, as her supporters claim, she's innocent, and we're searching for a motive that doesn't exist. So where are we now, in 2026? Lucy Letby is in prison, serving a whole life sentence. She'll likely die behind bars. The families are trying to heal, with some becoming powerful advocates for patient safety. The doctors who first raised concerns are seen as heroes, but they live with the guilt of not being able to stop things sooner. And the public remains deeply divided. What we know for sure is this: 7 babies died, and 7 more were harmed. A jury found Lucy Letby guilty, and hospital management failed to act on warnings, a failure that may have cost lives. Everything else is still being debated. The biggest lesson from this tragedy is simple. When people raise safety concerns, especially about children, they must be taken seriously. Immediately, the doctors at the Countess of Chester Hospital tried to sound the alarm. They were ignored and dismissed. And in that time, more babies were harmed and died. That is the systemic failure that can never be allowed to happen again. The story is uncomfortable because it shakes our trust in the very people meant to care for us. It shows how the unthinkable can happen in the places we feel safest. But at the heart of it all are the babies. Baby A, Baby B, Baby C, and all the others. They are not statistics. They are the real story, and they are why this case matters so much. They are why we must learn and why we must do better. What part of this story shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you want to understand more about how these major cases unfold, make sure to subscribe. There are parts of the Lucy Letby story we haven't fully explored yet, details that make the picture even more disturbing. So today, let us talk about what life was like for Lucy Letby before she became Britain's most notorious killer. Lucy Letby grew up in Hereford, a quiet town in England. Her parents, John and Susan, were ordinary people. Her father was a furniture salesman, her mother a secretary. Lucy was their only child. They loved her and gave her a comfortable childhood. There's no evidence of abuse or trauma in her early years. No red flags that suggested she'd become a murderer. She was a normal student, not brilliant, but decent. She had friends, went to school, and dreamed of becoming a nurse. And she achieved that dream. She trained at the University of Chester, passed her exams, and qualified as a nurse in 2011. She immediately got a job at the Countess of Chester Hospital. For the first few years, there were no complaints about her work. She seemed competent, caring, and reliable. So what changed? One of the creepiest aspects of this case is Lucy's obsession with the families of the babies who died. Police found she had searched for them on Facebook over 2,500 times. Think about that number. She'd search for the parents' names late at night, sometimes at 3 a.m., sometimes on the anniversary of a baby's death. She'd look at their photos, read their posts, and see how they were coping with their grief. One mother posted photos of a family holiday, trying to find joy again after losing her baby. Lucy Letby looked at those photos. Another family posted a memorial tribute on their baby's birthday. Lucy Letby looked at that too. What was going through her mind as she scrolled through these pages? Guilt? Satisfaction? Curiosity? We'll never truly know because she's never explained it. Lucy didn't just search for families online. She contacted them in real life. She sent sympathy cards to parents whose babies had died. Beautiful cards with thoughtful messages. expressing her sadness and offering comfort. At the time, these cards seemed kind. A nurse who clearly cared so much. But knowing what we know now, those cards feel sinister. Imagine writing a sympathy card to a family for a baby you murdered. Imagine sitting down, picking out a card, writing kind words, and mailing it. Some psychologists call this duping delight, the pleasure a killer gets from fooling everyone, hiding in plain sight. Lucy even attended funerals. She stood next to grieving parents and cried with them. One father remembered Lucy hugging his wife at their baby's funeral, both of them in tears. Now, he knows Lucy was the one who killed his child. The betrayal is unimaginable. During the investigation, police discovered Lucy had strong feelings for a doctor at the hospital. We'll call him Dr. X, as his name has been kept private. Dr. X was married, but Lucy had developed a crush on him. She texted him frequently, sometimes flirting, though he didn't seem to reciprocate. Investigators theorized that Lucy may have harmed babies to get Dr. X's attention. When a baby collapsed, he would rush to help. Lucy would be there, working alongside him, trying to save the baby. In those dramatic moments, they were a team. And maybe, in Lucy's mind, that created a bond. After one baby died, Lucy texted Dr. X multiple times, checking in and offering support. It's a chilling theory that babies were harmed partly because a nurse wanted to impress a doctor. While it couldn't be proven as the sole motive, the pattern of texting Dr. X after incidents was there in the evidence. What's terrifying is how many people worked closely with Lucy and never suspected a thing. She had friends on the nursing staff. They'd go out for drinks, celebrate birthdays, and chat about their lives. None of them thought she was a killer. Even as babies kept dying, most nurses just thought it was a terrible run of bad luck. Only the doctors, looking at the medical patterns, realized something was wrong. Some of her colleagues, shocked, broke down crying in the witness box, unable to believe their friend could do such things. That's how good Lucy was at hiding. The trial had powerful moments that didn't make it into most news coverage. When the parents gave their victim impact statements, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom, except, apparently, for Lucy Letby, who showed little emotion. One mother described holding her baby as he died, not knowing it wasn't natural. She spoke of years of grief and guilt, wondering if she'd somehow failed to protect her child. A father talked about his daughter's short life, the hope he'd felt, and the devastating call that she'd collapsed. These statements were a heartbreaking reminder of the real people whose lives were destroyed. The judge, Mr. Justice Goss, showed visible emotion when sentencing Lucy. He called her actions cruel, calculated, and cynical, noting her complete lack of remorse. He sentenced her to life in prison with a whole life order. But Lucy refused to come to the courtroom to hear it. She stayed in her holding cell, avoiding the family's faces. The judge sentenced an empty chair. The government has since changed the law. Now, judges can order defendants to appear for sentencing, and if they refuse, they can be forced. Even with all the evidence, testimony, and investigation, there are still so many questions we can't answer. Did Lucy harm other babies we don't know about? She worked at the hospital for years before 2015. Were there earlier victims? Police investigated, but they couldn't find clear evidence of earlier crimes. The pattern seemed to start in 2015, but we can't be completely sure. Why did she keep the medical records? Why did she take confidential hospital documents home and store them in her house? Was it for trophies? Was it carelessness? Or something else entirely? And the biggest question of all, why? Why would someone become a nurse, a profession built on caring and healing, and then use that very position to kill? Lucy has never given a real answer. Her handwritten notes suggest some kind of internal conflict, but they don't explain the why. Maybe she doesn't even know why herself. The Countess of Chester Hospital is still operating. The neonatal unit is still there, caring for sick babies. But everything has changed. There are new managers, new protocols, more oversight, and more training on recognizing when something is wrong. Parents who bring their babies there now know the history. They know what happened in those rooms. And the staff know that the eyes of the country are on them. The hospital has apologized to the families. They've admitted failures and promised to do better. But apologies can't bring back the babies who died. This case has changed things beyond just one hospital. Medical schools now teach about healthcare serial killers as part of their curriculum. Future doctors and nurses learn the warning signs, the importance of speaking up, and that the impossible can sometimes be real. Hospital managers across the country have reviewed their procedures for handling concerns about staff members. And the public has been reminded that we must be vigilant, even in places we think are the safest. The Lucy Letby case has joined the ranks of Britain's most infamous criminal cases. It's mentioned alongside names like Harold Shipman and Beverly Allitt. These are names that make people shudder, names that represent the darkest possibilities of human nature. Let me share something powerful with you. One of the mothers whose baby was killed wrote a letter that was read in court. The essence of what she said was this. She talked about how she trusted the hospital completely, how she'd been scared when her baby was born premature, but the nurses had reassured her. "We'll take care of your baby," they'd said. And she believed them. She described Lucy Letby holding her baby, feeding her baby, caring for her baby. And she'd felt grateful. Then came the collapse, the emergency, the death. For years, she grieved, thinking it was just tragic bad luck. Learning the truth shattered her all over again. It wasn't bad luck. It was murder. She said the hardest part was knowing that when Lucy held her dying baby, when Lucy looked into her eyes and said, "I'm so sorry. We did everything we could." Lucy was lying. Lucy had done this. That mother's words capture the profound betrayal at the heart of this case. As we close this story, it's important to remember that while Lucy Letby's case is extraordinary, the vast majority of nurses and doctors are heroes. Every day, healthcare workers save lives. They work long hours in difficult conditions, caring for the sick and comforting the dying. The nurses and doctors who raised concerns about Lucy, they are the real heroes of this story. They risked their careers and reputations to protect babies. They persisted even when they were told they were wrong. Dr. Breyer, Dr. Jairam, and others like them represent the very best of medicine. They put patients first, even when it was incredibly hard. So yes, Lucy Letby's story is dark. It's disturbing. It challenges our trust. But it also shows that when good people persist, when they refuse to stay silent, justice can eventually prevail. The babies who died will never be forgotten. Their names are written in court records, but more importantly, they're written in their parents' hearts. Baby A, Baby B, Baby C, and all the others, they mattered. Their short lives had meaning, and their deaths changed a system, changed laws, and changed how we protect the most vulnerable. That's their legacy. And perhaps that's the only light we can find in this very dark story. That from this tragedy came change, came awareness, came a determination to never let it happen again. The nurse who killed has been stopped. The system that failed is being reformed. And the families, though they carry unbearable grief, have seen justice done. The Lucy Letby case is not fully over. Legal reviews and debates continue. But the main story, the story of how a trusted nurse became a killer, how she was stopped, and how a country grappled with an almost unbelievable evil, that story is one we must remember. Not to dwell on darkness, but to remember why vigilance matters, why speaking up matters, and why protecting the vulnerable matters most of all. Thank you for staying with this difficult story to the end. If this made you think, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. In a world where such darkness can exist, it's the people who speak up, who care, and who persist in doing what's right, who truly make the difference.